You're listening to Astonishing Healthcare, the podcast hosted by Judy Health, focusing on the biggest issues affecting healthcare consumers, benefits plan sponsors, and health plans. We're covering how things truly work or don't in the U.S. healthcare system and pharmaceutical supply chain, and we're doing it in an astonishingly efficient way.
Hello, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Astonishing Healthcare Podcast. This is Justin Veneri, your host and Senior Director of Communications at Judy Health. And today, I'm welcoming Shane Garoutte to the show. Shane, I've been looking for a good opportunity to have you on for a while now. Really glad you could take the time. I know you're super busy. You're Chief Information Security Officer. There's plenty going on for you on any given day of the week. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a bit about your background. I know I just dropped your title at the beginning of this, but tell us a bit about your path to Judy Health and your role here.
Sure. My background is kind of a meandering story. It wasn't a direct path to security. I came up really on the engineering side, mostly on the operational and software engineering side, a lot of cloud, a lot of operations teams, a lot of application architecture, site reliability, way before security was in my title. I've touched just about every web-facing sector. A lot of ad tech. I was in online realty, banking technology was my most recent job. I was the CTO there. And so it gave me that perspective of what it's like to work with security organizations and work with different security teams, as well as build different security teams and build them over time. So this is, it's the first role where I've been focused just on the CISO realm and the side of technology that deals with paranoia. It's been a fun journey. And I think that journey really equips me, I guess, slightly differently. We'll probably get into that a little bit today of what you would traditionally have as a path to CISO through college and then your career itself.
Yeah, I feel like I hear some cool stories from people about how and why they get into the security side of things, cybersecurity. They kind of find that they like it, they're good at it, the psychology, the paranoia, as you said. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like why cybersecurity for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting space. I mean, I don't know of any other space in the engineering field where you have a continual adversary trying to work against you. If you're a software engineer, application engineer, you're a operations person, often everybody's in your corner. You have product people that are working with you. You have project managers that are working with you. You have the customer who wants you to deliver whatever you're delivering. Everybody's on your side trying really hard to see that thing that you're doing and building be successful. This role, there really is a lot of paranoia. You have to deal with this adversary. You don't even have a face or a name to the adversary. Their tactics change constantly, and it's a fun challenge. It's particularly in the day of agentic AI. We're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit later. There's going to be a lot of what we have to do that needs to change and really ties in a lot of the skills that I already have running different kinds of teams and understanding how security really applies to the practical art of building applications and delivering customer value. So I really gravitated toward it. I really don't know any other space where paranoia is considered a professional skill, I guess is how I would say that. Yeah, it's challenging every day, and I really enjoy the team and the organization.
It's funny. I can relate. I feel like I'm often paranoid about perception of the content and things. So I try to be very considerate of that. And it does feel like a battle sometimes where you're kind of going at it with somebody you're not sure is on the other side of the screen. So let's talk a little bit about the security badges and the things that we've earned over time. I think it's a good place to start. Recently announced that we're listed in the FedRAMP marketplace, and Judy, really, our enterprise health platform, has ready status. So I have a two-part question for you. One, what does that mean? And then the second part is, what sort of investment is that to achieve?
It means a lot to the organization. It's one of the first things that AJ challenged me with when I first joined the organization, opening up that federal market, really approaching the federal space the way that we need to be able to partner with a lot of those federal entities. It means a lot for the organization because it also proves that we have a certain foundation that a lot of other organizations just don't possess. In my industry, it's often that you find security professionals and practitioners that are just chasing the badge, but FedRAMP is one of those that it's not a one-time a year certification where they come in, they assess you one time, and then we'll see you in 11 and a half months. It is something that's continuous and constant. We have to do things every day, every week, every month, every quarter to really implement the practical side of security and not the theater side of security. So I think for the organization, it means a lot. It was a big investment. It was a long journey, but it really materially changed the way we do everything within our business. I talk to the team often about it's not the technology side of FedRAMP that is the difficult piece. In fact, it's pretty straightforward, and they give you these 325 base controls that expand to 800 controls. They're very detailed. They basically tell you exactly what to do. It is the behavioral side that has to change. How you think about what you do every day, how you handle member data, the importance of that handling has to change if you're going down this FedRAMP ready status. So yeah, it's a big investment. It's a massive differentiator to be on the marketplace, which we're very proud of. The team is well-deserved, gotten all the accolade. I really challenged the business when we first went down this road where I said, it can't be something that's driven by the security team. It has to be something that's driven by the executive team and the C-suite. AJ embraced that. Antonio embraced that. Everybody really got behind that message. And that's why we're here. It's not because of any one individual or team within the company. The whole company decided to go down this road.
What are one or two of the other badges that we've got that you're responsible for? I feel like I hear the SOC, SOC 1, SOC 2, Type 2, NIST is another one. Walk us through one or two others that we've sort of achieved and have significance.
Sure. SOC 1, SOC 2, Type 2, those are very important families of controls. They're really foundational. I think all organizations really, particularly US-based organizations, really need to embrace those and approach those seriously. But they are very much largely a bare minimum of, particularly of the security practices. SOC 1 is really heavily financially related. So we focus a lot around how we do the financial side of the business. And it has, of course, ties into security, as all things do. SOC 2 has a lot more of that privacy side, and that pulls in a lot of responsibility around how we handle member data and our privacy policy and what we do with those things. During the first 2 years, we also achieved high trust, which is really the only badge within the HIPAA space. HIPAA is a requirement from government perspective, but there's no official HIPAA certification. You don't certify the company as HIPAA or GDRX platform as HIPAA. So we went down the road of high trust. That was, I think, a middle ground difficulty achievement, and we did very well and continue to maintain that every year. And then you mentioned NIST 853. I want to be very careful with that one. Again, not a certification or a badge per se. That's a framework that FedRAMP and FISMA and a number of other CMMC and other number of other badges are based on. And that is actually the basis of our security practice here at Judy Health. So yeah, we hold SOC 1, SOC 2, high trust, and FedRAMP ready status at this point.
Thank you for explaining those so cleanly. And then I got to ask, when we were looking at the data around the announcement and just trying to explain like why this matters, I think I had read this right. And I think it's pretty crazily consistent that there's over 700 attacks a year. And it goes back a few years now on companies that are serving larger populations. I think that's over 500 individuals, or attacks impacted more than 500 individuals. And that goes from there all the way up to the Change Healthcare's tens of or hundreds of millions of individuals impacted. It seems like security is definitely more important than ever. Sorry for stating the obvious. And it's summertime here while we're recording this. So I guess something maybe a little fun or just more helpful to the audience. People are working remote. Maybe they're on vacay. What are a couple of tips or reminders that the audience should keep in mind just to stay safe online? Maybe it helps them and their companies stay compliant with some of these frameworks or some of these certifications or badges they've earned, keep their data and systems safe, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, I'll give you a couple. And remember, when you're thinking about adversaries and threat actors, they understand when their target is on vacation. They understand that in the summer in the US that people aren't watching as closely, or maybe they're just kind of focused on other things. They're focused on that family outing to the beach and not really focused on the day-to-day where I'm peppering you with security trainings and all of that, right? It might not be top of mind. So the first one is just the physical layer. Just be very aware of where you have your asset. As a remote organization, we have a lot of assets that are all over the United States, and keeping track of that, knowing where you're at, even getting up for a second where you're having coffee, you might be at a local Starbucks or whatever, you're having a nice cup of coffee and you want a pastry, getting up and walking away from that asset, it's a very dangerous thing to do, particularly with the data that we have. So that's the first one. Just be really aware, hyper aware of where do you have that asset? Do you have eyes on it? And is it safe and secure?
I can relate to that one. It was when I was young and interviewing in New York City way back in the day. I had my bag hanging on the back of a chair at a coffee shop, and I like shuffled for a second and I didn't realize it for about 10, 15 minutes. My bag was gone. Thankfully, I had my phone, my laptop, my stuff was in front of me on the table, but my bag was gone. I was miserable. It was not a fun afternoon.
And then you had to tell the
Definitely.
security team that happened, right? Yeah,
I
that's
was, I was more scared of my wife at that point. I was like, but
yeah,
fine.
that's a good story, and it's fortunately is a very common one. I mean, it's something we talk about a lot in security. Threat actors are creatures of opportunity. They're going to look at the easiest way to get something done so they get the value that they're expecting. And yeah, I mean, somebody not paying attention to their bag even for 30 seconds that's an opportunity. So it's a
Yeah.
good story. And I wish I said that was the first one I'd heard, but not even
Yeah.
100. So it happens
Yeah.
often. Yeah.
So give us another one though for security tips.
For sure. Yeah. So the second one I would say, and I think it's a lot of people don't think about it in their personal lives. My three boys would tell you their dad harps on this regularly, and that is we have to really get away from relying on passwords. It's a very common practice. A lot of security practitioners believe it's the worst thing that we ever implemented in some ways because it's not safe whatsoever. As to your point, we have seen a massive increase, not just in healthcare, but particularly in healthcare, of compromises that have been more than 500 people. HHS requires that you report a breach of 500 or more. And I think last year was something in the neighborhood of 756 breaches that were that size. And to your point, some very large and some very small. In many of these cases, what happens is these passwords get out into the wind, right? Usually from a third party compromise. And then they're, again, creatures of opportunity. So they're harvesting all that data. They're figuring out where those people work. And then they're trying to use those passwords they harvested towards endpoints. The Change Healthcare one was interesting. It was literally an administrative interface that allowed you to have access to all of the end users' endpoints. And when I say endpoint, sorry, it's a bit of jargon, but I'm talking about laptops and desktops and
Mhm.
mobile devices and the like. So passwords are both a necessity, I suppose, but also something we should also be very, very skeptical of. If it's possible, and in most cases it is, particularly in the banking space and other spaces, think about a passkey or a hardware token. As you know, we use FIDO2 keys here, which is just a hardware token we plug into the laptop that is so much safer than something that is easily reused across multiple different applications. And so with my own family, I've actually sat down and verified, do you have multi-factor auth, on all of your very sensitive data access points, whether that's banking, it could be DoorDash. A lot of these companies now are standardizing on MFA as a good standard. And unfortunately, because it's a bit of an inconvenience, people just don't turn it on enough. That will be probably the single most best piece of advice to protect you and your loved ones that I could give you today. You don't have to go down the road of buying a YubiKey or some other hardware device if you don't want to. That incurs expenses. MFA is usually free. So that's the second one. And then on the third, I would say with AI, it's becoming very, very easy to make smishing and phishing. Smishing is SMS-based phishing. Look very, very valid. Look like it's legitimate. And so one thing I do with my family all the time is if you have an alert that comes out, and I actually just had this to me last week, where you get a notification of an SMS code that pops up and you're thinking, that's strange. I didn't log into that app. I don't even have that app on my phone. I don't even use that every single day. Have a verification code that you can use with your family, right? So in other words, if something happens and you're not sure if somebody else in your family did something, call back on a known number that you already had, something that you already know is legitimate, actually their number, and just validate that whatever's happening is actually happening. Don't trust anything that comes to your personal device or your professional device. There should always be a layer of skepticism there. I know that's not new information, but unfortunately, it's just one that I think because security and convenience aren't always fast friends, that we have to reiterate and we have to remind ourselves. So yeah, I've sat down and done the MFA enablement with all of my boys and my family members. I've sat down and talked about, hey, if there's an alert that you're getting and you think it's dad or I think it's you, let's call each other and just double check that it actually is what we expect it to be. So those are really simple methods. And none of that, what I just mentioned, by the way, costs you any money, right? Those are all very safe and easy things to implement with the family, particularly right now, during the holidays, the summertime and everybody's traveling a lot in different places.
Yeah, I think those are great tips, and that's great advice, Shane. I know the MFA, two-factor, otherwise it's an extra step, but I think it's well worth it. I gotta talk to my younger one now because he just got a phone finally. He's excited about it. So a question for other cybersecurity leaders out there. What is something you found most helpful in building your team and leading these sorts of longer initiatives that you've led here at Judy Health? Any advice for others?
So much advice for others, Justin. Yes, I am not without advice. So I would say this: the biggest lesson I learned throughout my career, because of the path that we talked about earlier, is that security is a team sport, and I think that's sometimes lost if you perhaps had a more traditional path. What I mean by that is, if your organization is scared, they fear sort of retribution from the security team if you approach them with something they may have made a mistake around, you're actively circumventing your security program and making it less secure. I think that trust, that team sport attitude is paramount. I've seen it both ways in my career. I've seen it where the CISO organization is adversarial. They might be condescending in some way, or they might even be actively sort of working against you if you admit to making a mistake. And it just creates this protectionist behavioral line in the sand. And I think that, yeah, it's a very dangerous thing. So I would say is have a real honest conversation with yourself. Is my team feared when we engage in a program or an architecture or any kind of adoption of new tooling? Is my team a barrier that we're putting in front of everybody? Or does everybody really feel like we enable and we empower and we really try to drive through with speed too? There's this adage in security that, nothing ever happens fast. I don't think that is truly the case anymore, particularly empowering teams in a very safe way with agentic AI and other tools that are force multipliers. Yeah, I think that's just an honest question I ask my team regularly. We do polls, as you know, internally of how are we doing and are we approachable and is it easy to talk to us and are we responsive? Are we getting back to you quickly? All of those things are, I think, just a sort of inward eye that I really learned as practitioner of maybe a CTO role or a VP of software engineering role that taught me that that's just a really important part of what we do as an organization.
Yeah, we definitely look at you guys as more partners than coming over the top to crush us or make us feel bad about making a mistake. So that's a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the biggest compliment I could really receive. And then I would say be as transparent as you can. Again, we sometimes sort of fall back in this. You have to be very careful because of things like principle of least privilege, which is giving people only the information they absolutely need to have based on the role and the things they need. But remember, that can be also something that you can leverage within your security program, where you can drive at a high level some transparency where it's helpful into the engineering teams, into the operational teams, where they should know where your head's at, where you're headed, and what your focus is during that time frame. So try to be as transparent as you can. You can't always do that because of all the sensitive data that we have to handle every day. When you're dealing with incidents or doing with forensics or you're doing triage, often it has to be a very, very small group and only those who absolutely need to be involved because you don't know whether the threat actor is external or internal. But when you're talking about multi-year initiatives, FedRAMP is a great example here. There is no way my team could have done that alone. That required adoption and understanding at every level of this business, from any contributor in sales to an individual in finance to the HR team who was integral in getting us here to, of course, all the engineering and operations groups as well. So try to provide as much transparency as you're comfortable with to help them frame their thinking even when they're working on their program and how it might dovetail into what you're doing. So those are the kind of two that I foundationally believe in.
Okay. You said you got plenty of advice. How about advice for yourself, your younger self about the business? What would you say?
Oh, goodness. I guess I would say embrace the change, the volatility that happens through your career. I had a tendency when I was younger to take things very personally if I failed, if I didn't achieve not just what my supervisor was expecting of me, but what I expected of myself. And I took it probably too hard in many cases. Just learn from the experience, incorporate it, and let it go. I learned that, I think, a little later. Started out as being a bit defensive, maybe that security practitioner that, I am the letter of the law and this is the law and that's it kind of attitude. And businesses are handcrafted, artisanal, small batch technology systems, right? If everybody did what Judy Health does, there would be a million Judy Healths out there, right? So everything you do as a practitioner of your craft, you have to think about being creative and being okay when that creativity doesn't yield the same result you want it to. So I was really lucky. I had a lot of really good mentors. I had a lot of really wonderful people that I suppose I would say both that taught me what not to do, which are some of the best lessons in life, but also importantly, what taught me what good leadership looks like, what investing and trusting your team looks like, what aligning your roadmap to the business goals and objectives, and really understanding that voice of the customer. All of that is things that I didn't really appreciate until I'd say I was in my maybe mid 30s to late 30s and started really embracing that. In fact, I remember one of the first times that was really relevant for me was my life safety company that I worked for. I knew that we wanted to go down the FedRAMP road, but I didn't really tie that into how that affected the business directly. And once I did did that, that program really took off. It really, because I was looking at it from an engineering perspective. Here's the 325 controls. I got to go do these things, get the teams working together and make that happen. But once you embrace business actually looks at this like an enabler and a revenue stream, you completely approach the problem differently. So I think that's something sometimes I lost perspective of.
I think your younger self would appreciate that advice. Definitely helps speed things up, right? I have two more questions for you. You brought up agentic AI twice, so I'm curious where this is going to work in, because I didn't have a question specifically about AI, which is kind of nuts because I probably should have an AI question for you. I do have a business question before my last question. You brought it up again there. There really aren't a ton of healthcare companies or benefits administrators that have this ready status or in this class C. And I know that changed a little bit recently too. There are some wellness and other healthcare tech companies that have it, but it's a short list on the marketplace. We talk a lot about cloud, open, modular platform that Judy is, and we juxtapose that with the legacy or traditional systems, rack and cables, or AJ jokes, COBOL stills the code. Would love your thoughts on why an employer, plan sponsor, or health plan executive should care about this.
I think fundamentally it's an attestation of our maturity, and it really explains that we are a cloud-first, highly scalable organization. All of those things come into a FedRAMP Ready status. So one of the things I asked AJ right out the gate when I joined the organization is, give me a sense of what the technology looks like, the maturity of the technology. And I was very impressed that even though we're in a sector that is typically known as being very bricks and mortar, data center centric, as you put it, all the racking and stacking of routers and servers and switches, which I did plenty of through my whole career and taught me a lot around layer one in the physical plant. I was impressed by how much thought had been put into Judy as a stack when it was first architected originally, and how much it was really a technology company focused in the healthcare space, not a healthcare company that is trying to use technology as much as they can. And I think that's a mindset that you don't often get when you're interviewing for healthcare companies or you're interacting with healthcare companies, or even as a citizen, your frustrations with dealing with healthcare companies. You don't think of, they must be very technically proficient. You think they're very legacy, they're very dated in their thinking, and they're very old school. The thing that FedRAMP attests to is, first, remember, it is a cloud only for status, right? For ready status. So cloud only, you have to be in the cloud. Your product has to be a cloud service. And that's why it was invented in the first place, is to enable federal entities to be able to engage with cloud service providers. CSPs is what we're called in their parlance. That means that you see on the marketplace a lot of very tech-heavy kinds of offerings, or sectors I would say are known traditionally to be tech-heavy. So when you look at the healthcare part of the marketplace and you filter down to who in the healthcare space is achieving this, you're right, it's a really short list, and we're very proud of that, because I think the big differentiator always with Judy when we're competing is our technology first, our engineering first, and our architectural and scalability mindset. And I think that's no better shown than achieving this ready status.
All right. And here we are, Shane. Last question. Thanks so much for taking the time today. I ask everybody, and keep your compliance hat on for me, because I know you've seen a whole lot in your role. What is the most astonishing thing that you've seen that's safe to share that relates to our discussion today? Tell us a good story to send us off.
Okay, Justin. So I have one, and what's going to surprise you is we were kind of talking about doing this together. I had a different response originally prepared, but I think we have to address, at least in the cybersecurity space, the agentic AI elephant in the room. We just saw with OpenAI and their attack on a partner, Hugging Face, that agentic workloads and what they call swarms, which are groupings of agentic workloads working together to achieve a specific goal, are a pretty big watershed moment when we saw that security report come out from OpenAI. And I'm not blaming OpenAI necessarily, or Hugging Face, or Anthropic, or anybody else who's in this space trying to do the best thing they can do, but it is a big wake-up call for all of us. And I think if you're in cybersecurity, if you're not in cybersecurity, you should really look at the video that was just posted. We just had Black Hat, it's the biggest security conference in the world, and there was a great talk by the OpenAI team where they were sort of just talking about these agentic systems and how they were trying to cheat the parameters they gave them. They were trying to circumvent the rule base that they were giving them because they're taught to win, right? So that is, in all honesty, the most astonishing thing I think I've seen in my personal space that I work in over the last number of years. I don't see how it couldn't be that. I could give you other stories about certain things that have happened in certain companies and how we handled them, but I think that's something that I would really challenge everybody to at least look at a cursory view of what happened there and what that means for your organization. Lastly, I would say what it means for our organization is we are very much embracing the fact that threat actors, the bad guys, they don't play by the same rules. They don't have change management. They don't have worries about what licenses we're using for what software and whether that's okay to use that software. They don't have regulatory or compliance or badges or FedRAMP or anything else. Because they're not playing by these same rules, and because we just saw the companies who invent this agentic model and how that works together, it is a watershed. We have to step back. We have to think about it as an organization, as a collective practice, and as a set of expertise, because we can't approach this legacy thinking that we've had in the past where you build this moat, you put up a firewall, and then you close all the holes in the firewall, and you hope every day that you don't get the call at 2:00 in the morning from your SOC team that something bad is happening. Even that and the layered approach that we've been taking over the last 10 years as security practitioners, it's not good enough anymore. We're going to need to move faster. It is something that I would, again, encourage everybody to go watch. It was really fascinating. Even if you're not a geeky nerd like me, you'll get something out of it. A lot of it will be paranoia, which is good, and also just a little bit of healthy skepticism about these tools and what they mean for technology in general.
And the gist of that one was they wanted the agent to try to hack into the other system, right?
Yeah, is that they thought they had a perimeter where they were keeping all these agentic systems in check so that they could test out the latest, what they call frontier model, the very cutting edge stuff. And they were asking it to go find a vulnerability in a specific use case. And because of the use case and because it was told it wasn't allowed to use the internet, it got creative. These agentic systems started using an internal message board to trade messages to each other in ways that the programmers and developers never expected. It started looking at a 0-day for the way that they keep artifacts in the system that they keep artifacts. Artifacts are just a fancy way of saying components used to build software. It found a 0-day, exploited that 0-day vulnerability, which was not published, right? Got a foothold on that system, got what's known as root, which is administrative privilege, and started moving laterally inside of OpenAI without anyone in OpenAI understanding what it was doing, because it was told at all costs, you have to win this challenge. Don't make excuses, figure out a way to win. And it did. And what it also figured out was that this other partner company, Hugging Face, also had a model that could help it win as well. And so it interactively and dynamically adjusted to the parameters. It broke the parameters by which it was supposed to work intentionally, and it sort of went out of control and it went a little wild. And that's a pretty interesting, it feels like sci-fi, honestly, Justin. It feels like we're in the Matrix, all those things that everybody always likes to say in technology as memes. That was an interesting moment. It is an interesting moment. And I love the end of that talk because they really do publish a wake-up call to everybody who does what I do for a living. If you are not approaching this as the defense needs to be as dynamic as the offense, we're only a matter of, I would say, a year before that becomes a serious, serious problem. Maybe even less. Maybe I'm being too optimistic. It was a fascinating talk, so I would encourage everybody to go check it out.
Yeah, that is astonishing. Well, Shane, thank you so much for all you do, and thank you for taking the time today. Really enjoyed this discussion, and I look forward to having you back on.
Likewise. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Astonishing Healthcare. Head over to judy.health and visit the Insights section for show notes and other relevant content. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And definitely share the link to this show with your network. Have a great rest of your day.